Guys, we're back and we're going to start working on our graph that goes beneath our data table here. It doesn't look fancy yet, but it will. So in our planning, again, going down here, we have this graph where we can pick a group, or in your case, it might be a position like a running back or a wide receiver position group, and pick the load we want to see, whether it's a load metric, so any load metric. Right now we have SRP, duration, and SRPE, some other things in there, and then a wellness picker, where we're picking sleep quality, energy, readiness score, whatnot, so that in this graph, it'll take averages of whatever group that we pick with the, maybe there's a bar and a line. The bar is the load and the line is the readiness, so that you can look at relationships over time. And although we're not going to create the graph today, we are going to do some, like, the most intense formulas that you're going to do today. So one thing that I'm thinking about is we set this up to select a cohort or a position group. But what if you want to see the entire team average and pick these metrics too? Well, that requires a different formula. And if you want that, then we'd have to consider that. So I'm thinking about, why not do the more complex option? And if you want, you can you can not do the team average option. And what that entails is, I'm going to move these down. This is our reference list that we collected last time that we're looking at for drop-down menus that you see here. These drop-down menus are going off of this reference list. And I'm just going to say class average, which might be team average. One thing that I'm going to have to do here is in this drop-down, this is, I guess, a good refresher, I'm going to have to reset the data validation that we've done previously. And the way that I do that is that I click on this cell. In the data tab, or the data tab, there's this little icon. This is data validation. I'm going to click on that. And right now it's looking at, for a list, it's looking at reference A3 through A6. I'm just going to change that to go through those. If I get out of that, click OK. Now I'll have the class average option too. Okay, so now we're going to get to the formulas. And we need the formulas because we're going to create a data set here that the graph looks at, although the data set won't be present in our visualization. And the best way to set this up, I think, is, so we're going to have dates, because the x-axis on the graph is going to be dates over time. So like dates, dates, dates. And then we're going to have, let's just say, load and readiness. So what we're going to start off by doing is we need to get the aggregations of these things that we want. And we need to consider what is selected in here. And we need to treat the class average different from the cohorts because the formulas are a little bit different. So the way that we're going to start this off is, for load, let's say, I'm going to go equals if, and, because there are multiple things that we need to consider here, if whatever's in this cell here, A48, is equal to, I'm going to go to our reference sheet, whatever this is here, and I'm going to put dollar signs around it to lock the cell. And also, whatever's in here, I don't need the data viz, I don't know why it shows up, but I'm just going to say C48. So I'm just going to type in manually C48, because it looks cleaner, equals whatever this is. And again, I'm going to lock it in. If those two things are true, then we want to get an average ifs table TBL underscore daily RPE, or I think it's called latest RPE in my table, when table daily attendance refined. We made a column that tells us whether or not someone was here or not. We want that to be 1 because we don't care about, or we don't want to throw zeros into averages or blanks into averages potentially for people that weren't here. So we have those two things. So if those two things are true, and also, table daily date, we also want to know when the date is equal to whatever this date is here. We don't have a date in here yet, but we can do something. I don't like how it keeps on saying data viz, because this is a little bit overly complex, but that's a sheet that we're in. To make it look cleaner, you don't need this. And this is important because this is going to be a really long formula, so I want it to be as clean as possible. Now we're saying if this is class average and this is RPE, then we want to get the average of the RPE in our table when someone was here and the date is equal to whatever that date is. And I'm just going to throw in table daily ones is 1, and that's for a different reason. You probably don't have to worry about it. And all right, I wonder if this works. I just want to close it off and just, it says false. If I change this to RPE, it'll still say false, or it will give me an error, but that's because we don't have a date in here. And we're telling it to look at a date in cell B52. So let's just, for now, let's just make one up. So we know that people were here on 2-4-2020. Let's try that, 2-4-2020. Okay, so now we know that right now, as this formula stands, it's just telling us the class average RPE when someone was here, or for the people that were here on this date. So that's great. Now we need to consider everything else, and what that entails is mostly just replication. So after this, I'm going to remove the second parenthesis and do a comma. After I do that, I'm going to copy everything, the if and beyond, copy everything. And I'm going to paste it beneath. Now, the only change that we're going to make here is now, because we're still dealing with class averages, we're going to say, okay, so pretty much we said if this is class average and this is RP, then we're getting the average RP. But now what if this is class average and this is not RP? This is duration. Well, then we need to get the average duration, not the RPE. So reference B3, maybe if I go to the, I don't want to do an error. Oh, it's going to do an error. I'm going to do this in the reference sheet. Instead, I'm going to X out and do it in a reference sheet so that you can see what's going on, if I can. Comma, Alt, Enter to clean it up. This equals, I'm not going to do it in the reference sheet because I don't think I can get there successfully. But I know that reference B3, so now I'm saying if and this is equal to class average, and this is equal to whatever is in reference B3, which is duration, then we want to average the latest duration, if all of that stuff is true, and the date is the same date. And then I'm just going to do an Alt Tab, or Alt Enter, I'm sorry, and paste it again. And now I'm going to say, well, if it's reference B4 and the class average, then I want to get the average of SRPE when all these things are true. Alt Enter, paste it in again. And B5, I think, is grades. So I'm going to say if it's B5, then I want to get the latest grades if all that stuff is true. And all I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to close it off, okay? I'm just going to end it, and we're going to move forward in a second, but I click Enter. Let me just check. So we did RP, duration, SRPD, and grade. Perfect. So now let's just check this. Go back in here to our data viz. And so this is showing the class average RPE. If we change this to duration, now it's the class average duration for that date. Now class average SRP. Let's just check grade too. Perfect. And we did have grades on that date, I guess. But if we move this to athletes or Gen Pop or some other a position average, it's not going to work. So this is okay. And this could be serviceable if you wanted class team averages with multiple conditions. But we're not done here. And this is going to start to get a little bit a little bit wonky, a little bit fun though, and hopefully you learn a lot from it. So now we also need to consider the positions or the cohorts of interest. So I'm going to go back into this formula, do a comma, Alt Enter, and I'm going to copy and paste this again. There are going to be a lot of changes to it. Because now so if and A48, whatever's in this box is equal to reference A2. No, that's not necessarily true because we don't want to look at the class average. We want to look at the other cohorts. So I'm going to throw in an OR statement here. I'm going to say OR. So if A48 equals reference A3, now I'm going to do a couple commas, okay? They don't make sense right now, but A48 equals reference A3, or A48 equals reference A4, or A48 equals reference A5, or reference A48 equals A6. I don't actually remember how many there are, but I'm going to close it off. So if any of those things are true, and this equals reference B5, or well, let's go back to the first one. I think it's B2. Then we want to get the average of, we're back on RPE now, so latest RPE, when the people are here, when the date is that date, but also now when I did a comma, and now next to it I'm writing table daily, cohort of interest, close that off, comma, when the cohort of interest is equal to whatever this is, whatever's in A48. Now, one really important thing to note here, since we're looking at the cohort, we're looking at our data table, and we're comparing the text in that to what's in here, it's important that whatever the position name is or the cohort name is matches up. What I mean by that is, if in my reference sheet, let's say I say running back, like I spell out the word running back, but in my data table, I classify positions as RB, then those matches are not going to work. So there needs to be, however you make it work, and I have a couple strategies for it, making sure that those two things align, or else your chart won't work. In essence, what's in this box has to be the same word that is in your database, or the same text string that's in your database in order for this to work. So now we have this this part of the formula set up. It accommodates for the potential positional differences. I'm going to copy that, Alt Enter, paste it down, and we're just going to do the exact same thing, except we need to make one other. No, we don't have to make another change. So now if this equals B3, reference B3, C48 equals reference B3, we don't want the average latest RPE, we want the latest duration. Oh, sorry, that's not, I think it's called latest duration. I'm not sure why Excel won't show me if it's spelled right or not anymore, but, and the cohort of interest is equal to A48. And then I'm going to do Alt Tab, paste it again, and now we're on B4, but instead of latest RPE, we want the latest, I'm not sure why it's not showing up, so I don't know what it's called, SRPE, then Alt Enter. I think that's the last thing. Maybe there's one more. I don't remember, but I'm going to close it off. So, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to close this off for now. Click Enter. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do if error at the beginning. So if there's an error with any of this, then let's just make it blank for now. And now I'm just going to check and make sure I have these in the right order. RP, duration, SRP, oh, grade. So, sorry, I'm going to go back into this formula now. Do a comma after that. Alt, Enter. And I'm going to do an Alt, Enter again. I copy this, paste it down, Now we're on reference B5, but we don't want SRP anymore. We want the average grades. I'm just going to do the same. All you have to do now after you do that is just add another parenthesis right there, and you'll know that the formula is over when the last parenthesis is black, pretty much. That's a pretty good rule to follow. Click enter. So now we have grade and we have class average for this date, but what if I switch to athletes? Now I have the average grade for this date for people that want to work with athletes, or this might be running backs in your case, now wide receivers or whatnot, right? So now we are able to switch positions, switch the load metric, and that's great. So now we have that working, and now we need to apply some other, now we need to apply this to the readiness stuff, and we also need to have it work with multiple dates. And the quickest way to do this is to copy and paste this formula that we've already created somewhere else and just change some things in this formula. I'm going to click escape to get off of this copied, but and make sure, so when we use this find and replace, be careful and make sure that this doesn't change. Sometimes it will, and you got to undo it. So just be careful, make sure that you're replacing only the stuff in this cell. So I'm going to go into here, I'm going to highlight the cell and some others, find, replace, and I am going to replace reference B2 with, or sorry, reference B with reference C. And now when you're in the cell, so I'm in this formula, it's going to screw things up if I try to replace it now. So I'm going to exit out. Now that I'm not in the formula anymore, I'm going to highlight this in a couple of other cells and do that replacement so that it stays within that cell. So now what I pretty much told it to do is I said, instead of looking at this load stuff in this reference B, we want to look at the readiness stuff in this reference C. Now the next replacement that I'm going to make is, before we're looking at C48 with the load. We're looking at that cell. Does whatever, does pretty much does what the reference in this area, does that match up with that cell? And instead we want to look at I48 instead. So I'm going to copy and paste this, C48, and we're going to replace it with I48, because now we're moving on to the readiness stuff, and we want our manipulations in the readiness cell to take place with this formula here. Again, I'm going to escape out, okay? Make sure that I'm not in the formula, and you'll know you're in the formula when you see these colors and stuff around. So I'm out of the formula, find and replace C48 with I48. Perfect. So now we can already see that things are working. They're not working exactly the way that we need them to, but things are starting to work. So what we need to do is, right now, this is pretty much what we're saying is we are getting the average of the latest RPE right now, because I48 is equal to reference C2, which is stress. So those two things are the same, but we're still getting the average of latest RPE when we actually want the average of the latest stress. So now we're going to have to change what we're getting the average of. And the way that we do that is, if I highlight all this stuff, I'm going to do a find replace. I'm going to type in latest RPE. You can see all the headers in these brackets here. Latest RPE with stress. Now if I do that, now we're looking at the latest stress. So now I'm just going to kind of go down the list. Instead of latest duration, I want to look at sleep quality. And you have to know what the column header names are in your table to do this. So sleep quality without a space. Perfect. I'm going to change SRPE with energy. And it's important that this follow, and we'll go over it in a second. SRPE with energy, and then I'm going to change grades with readiness score. So now let's go through. So it's really important that these, the order that we just went in, matches up with the order of these. So the second one was duration. We replaced it with sleep quality. The third one was SRP. We replaced it with energy. Last one was grade. We replaced it with readiness score. The reason for that is because what we're saying now is, let's go to the next line. If I-48 is equal to reference C3, which is sleep quality, then we want to get the average of sleep quality. So we're just lining things up well. And now we have a formula that we can just throw in here. And now if I change load, the load one will change, right? If I change a readiness one, the readiness one will change. Right now we're on class average. What if we want to know about athletes? What if we want to know about, I don't know, youth? Okay. So far, so good. Now we need to deal with the dates. And we need to think about how we want this to work. So, and how many dates we want to display. For me, I want, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days to display, the most recent 5 days. So, and I want them to be most recent, or I want them to align with whatever's in this dashboard, perhaps. So what I can do is I can have the latest date, which is going to be on this side. I'm going to have that equal to whatever this is. Lock it in. So now my latest date in my data set, if we're looking at the past 5, will always be whatever the date is that I select up here for the rest of my data set. And now we're going to have to figure out how to get this date, or the most recent date before this one, and then the one before that, and the one before that, etc., all the way down to here. And we're going to do some conditions around that too. So let's start this off by saying if, I must have caps lock on, if, or, let's say if this cell is either blank, or if that cell is the minimum table daily date, if that cell is the minimum date in our data set, or, sorry, I'm screwing this up. If, I'm gonna try that again, equals if, or this cell equals the minimum table daily date. If that cell is the minimum date in our data set, or I'm just gonna type in L52 because that's the cell I'm looking at, equals blank. If either of those things are true, then I want this cell to be blank. But if neither of those things are true, then I want to get the maximum, or max ifs. I want the maximum table daily date if the date in my table is less than, I think I do and, is less than that cell. So now what I'm telling Excel to do is, first of all, if whatever is in L52 is the minimum date, or if it's blank, then just make this blank, because I don't want to go screw things up by putting in errors and weird things beyond the minimum date. But if that's not true, then I want to get the maximum date in my data set. If that date is less than, that should say L, is less than the date to the right of it, pretty much. And I'm going to do an if error. If there's an error with any of this, comma, blank. Oh, sorry, I started editing the formula up here. Click enter. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight these. I'm going to do go up to the formatting up here and do short date so I can see what it is. Okay, so looks like it's working. That might be the most recent date. We can check. 2/4/130. Perfect. Well, I have the data sorted this way too, so I know. Now I'm going to copy this formula and I'm going to paste it here. Let's open it up a little bit to make sure that it's okay. I'm going to copy that formula and I'm going to paste it here. And I'm going to copy that formula and I'm going to paste it here. But that's not going to work. And the reason why it's not working is because we have these things, we have these columns hidden, And so now it's looking at a column that's hidden. It's looking at E52 because now between B and C there is no space, whereas there were columns hidden between these other areas. So I'm just going to change E52 to be C52 in this case. So C52, C52, and C52. Okay, great. Now we need to get these and apply them to all these dates. And what I did, probably shouldn't have done now that I think about it, is that we locked in the date cells that these formulae are looking at as this cell, B52 here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these, and I'm just going to paste these formulae here, 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 and here. And we're going to do another find replace. So with this one, we're going to replace B52 for C52, and then F52, I, and L. So select those cells. Let's just go, we're replacing $sign B52 with $sign C52. In these two cells that we have highlighted, click replace. I'm going to select these ones, but instead of C52, I want to replace B52 with F52. F52. Select these ones, again, similar concept. Instead of B52, we want them I. So I'm going to replace them with I52. And then here, instead of I want it to be L. Click OK. Click OK. So now, theoretically, if I were to change this, say athletes, all my data will change for each of those dates. These are the averages, average RPE and average readiness score for the cohort, for the people that want to work with athletes, or in your case, it might be a positional group, for 121, 123, 128, 130, and 24. And now if I go up here, and let's say I'm looking at a different date on my dashboard, maybe it's, I don't know what dates exist in here, 2/11. All right, let's try 2/11. And this is 2/11, 2020. This data changes. I go down, and now my most recent date, which you can't see, is now 2/11, 2020, and these numbers will coincide with that. Okay, so we did pretty well so far. And the last thing that we're going to do is move these out of the way. So one nice thing about this is, I can move this 2-6 over here. This date is not going to change. I can move this over here. It doesn't matter. The date is not going to change. I'm going to move them back now. And that's, I'm looking for these crosshairs, clicking and dragging. But we're going to have a chart here, right? And these filters will probably be here too. So let's move these down a little bit. Now we'll have some room for the graph. So I'm going to move this down, maybe to down here for now. And eventually we'll hide this or move it somewhere else. But that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to actually build out the graph that will be talking to this data, and we'll be able to transform that graph by manipulating some of these variables that we have here. Great work, and I'll see you in the next video.